So I want to welcome you to Keys to Successful Nonprofit Executive Leadership, the key stages of executive search. This is a program that Dennis Miller is providing exclusively for members of the Anchor Network. And I know he's very excited about speaking to you today. Dennis, if you're not already familiar with him, is a nationally recognized coach and executive search. He has more than 30 years of experience working with board leadership and chief executive officers and C-suite executives, helping nonprofits reach their highest potential. He is a published author. He is a sought-after expert for board leadership, and he speaks nationally on the topic. And I would like to now introduce Dennis Miller to you.
Thank you, Michelle. And the fact you said 30 years of experience makes me feel so much younger. So I feel good already, Michelle. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Let me just begin. I want to thank all of you for not joining us. I want to thank all of you for what you do for so many people, that individuals and adults and families of development disabilities and intellectual, physical, for the work you do. And nowadays, it's even tougher in the coronavirus situation. So I want to just begin by thanking all of you for what you do here. Michelle, could we move this along here a little bit? Today I'm going to focus in on the keys for successful executive leadership recruitment. It's been estimated that in the next 5, even 10 years, 75% of current nonprofit leaders will probably believe in their position. Two things have been driving that, as you probably know well. One was certainly early on in the people that chose careers in the nonprofit sector as a result of the social changes that were taking place in the 60s and 70s. So there's a lot of baby boomers that will be retiring. So there's a lot of that going on. And then second is that a lot of boards are realizing the kind of competencies and leadership skill sets that are needed are vastly different than they are today. So oftentimes boards are looking for new leaders to come in and help give organizations to the next level here. So we're going to be addressing today 5 key stages of an effective executive search. I'm going to talk about whether you do the search yourself or you outsource or hire a firm to do the search, and I'll go over the pros and cons of that. But there's 5 stages I want to focus in on, and then each one of them will go into more depth here. We're also going to make sure we take your questions. First stage, obviously, it's very, very important. And again, I'm going to focus on executive searches. By executive search, I'm referring to your CEO searches, your COO searches, a CFO, Chief Development Officer, maybe Chief Strategy Officer, but someone that's at the executive level report, either the CEO reports to a CEO. So the first thing, obviously, it's very, very important before you start running out looking to hire someone, to recruit somebody, is to do really a sort of aggressive assessment of your organization. What are the strategic challenges you're facing today? And what's the role that the new person needs to play in addressing that and creating an ideal position profile? I'm going to give you a couple examples of that here. So clearly, that's very important to address here. Number 2 is the stage of once you have this position profile, you know the type of candidate you're looking for. This is a big factor where organizations who try to do a search themselves have real difficulty succeeding, is the extensive outreach to targeted organizations, professional trade groups, identifying candidates with the skills and competencies and personal attributes that you will need. So in stage 3, we're going to talk about is approaching candidates and their interests and how to persuade candidates that are not considering a position, not looking for a new job, which is key to this, to have them consider an opportunity with your organization. How to present the most qualified candidates to you or to yourself after conducting an in-depth interview. And we're going to talk a lot about that process of interviews, but also personality assessments and evaluations that best match that ideal position. We'll talk a lot about the assessment of the individual's core traits. And then number 5, which a lot of organizations don't do a good job on, is the not just completing the search, but in the onboarding. So you don't want to just sort of turn over the car keys to somebody without realizing that they don't know how to turn on the AM/FM radio or the heat or the air conditioner or the windows. So it's really important to provide an onboarding support, and we'll talk about that as well here. So those are sort of the 5 stages of an executive search that we're going to talk about today, and look forward to moving on. So Michelle. When you find out that someone in your organization has either left or leaving or announced they're leaving, or someone's been asked to leave, you have a decision in front of you, right? Do you do it yourself? Do you have the time and energy to do it yourself? And do you engage a search firm? If you want to do a search yourself, you can do it, but there's a couple of things I want to emphasize throughout this webinar that are things I think you'll need to do probably differently. One is, the biggest thing is, a lot of times people underestimate, particularly at the CEO search level, but even at the COO search level, they underestimate the time and energy involved in doing a search. Number 2, when one does a search by themselves, they underestimate thinking that, well, if we just put a nice ad in or on Indeed or social media posting, we will have a lot of people apply to us. When you do that, you're kind of missing the talent out there. You're only most likely going to get people that are looking for a new job, and there's nothing wrong with looking for a new job, but oftentimes they're not the people that are going to be the most successful for your organization. You got to think about that. So you have to make a decision at some point. Do we have the ability to do a search internally, or do we have to go to an outside firm and things like that? Next, okay. So we talked about the 5 stages. The first stage right up front is really, though it creates a lot of anxiety, obviously, when there's an opening, particularly at any level of the executive office, but it actually can be a very positive time to reevaluate your organization, think a little differently, and think about the future. So negatives can always be positive, right? Other times there's crisis, there's opportunity here. So the first thing you kind of want, the questions we get asked a lot is, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? So in terms of a executive director or CEO search, which comes first? Do you do a strategic plan first, or do you hire a person to do the strategic plan? There's no one right or wrong answer per se, but I do think you don't necessarily have to do some kind of a comprehensive strategic plan. But I do think you want to, internally with your board and your leadership team, kind of do an assessment, even at any level of executive office, kind of do an evaluation of kind of where you are in your strategic vision and your life cycle. What are the key challenges today? That we all know the challenges that every one of us have had, over the past 8 months, clearly with the coronavirus situation and the challenges that has created, massive challenges for everybody. So identify, where you're headed and the challenges, and also your internal obstacles. Because those, when you do that assessment, you spend time with it, you can have a much better idea of the kind of person you want to have, and we'll get into a second about executive competencies. I had a conversation just 2 days ago with a colleague of mine who was a CEO for a long time, and asked him how he was doing in his former organization. And he said, he's retired like sort of 5 or 6 years ago. He says they're on their 3rd CEO. He said they just never did an assessment up front. They went ahead and hired someone they thought looked good on paper, and none of them turned out to be a good match. So before you go out and do any search for yourselves or even hiring a firm here, the first thing you want to do is conduct this internal assessment. What we do for clients, obviously, is a tremendous amount of stakeholder interview questions. This is the time on a CEO search to be talking to board members and executive team members, maybe even a key donor or two, maybe a key stakeholder in the community, about what their thoughts are. At a COO or CFO search, same thing, asking members of the executive team, and certainly even people who report to them, kind of what they feel they need. Make people feel they've been part of the process as well. Even if you don't necessarily, may not feel like you need their input, it's very important to get as much input as you possibly can. Next. So a key part of prior to doing a search is understanding the competencies that you're going to need for this executive position. And today, more than ever before, the level of competencies are vastly different than they were in the past. Let me give an example. And by competencies, I'm not just referring to the word skills. Skills and competencies, as you know, are oftentimes used interchangeably. Skill is something that you learn on the job. How well do you put in an agenda together, a meeting notice? How well do you do this and how well do you do that? Things you've learned on the job. Competencies is how well you do what you learned on the job. And so, though it's in the past, it was very important for boards to look for people that kind of were very mission driven and community relationship oriented, and perhaps could be a good grant writer and bring in some grants or revenue, and a community relations person. Those skills and competencies are still very important, but there's a number of competencies that I want to talk about now that you should be thinking about when you are doing a search. Number one is visionary thinking. Today, more than ever before, in the past, boards used to say, here's our vision. We want to get someone to implement the vision. Today, though, more importantly, boards are seeking people that are visionary thinkers. In every community, there are dozens and dozens of people every day making a difference in the community who are thinking about the future and thinking about their vision. So visionary thinking is a very core competency that people are thinking about today, and that's a very, very important one. Number two, emotional intelligence. It's really important today, ever before, is this idea of not just getting along with people, but having an awareness of your own emotions, how your emotions impact others, and how other people's emotions impact others here, and have the ability to react to that and with self-awareness and in a way that brings people together here. So emotional intelligence from our world experience is much more important today than ever before about self-awareness than intellectual intelligence. So EQ is the buzzword more than IQ here, and I think that's important things to think about. Relationship builder. I remember when I wrote my first book came out in 2007, A Guide to Achieving New Heights, the 4 pillars of successful nonprofit leadership. The first pillar was relationship building. I mean, I'm sure you have too, so many organizations that had sort of a leader that they think they can do it by themselves, and nobody can. I mean, if you look at what makes a great organization, any good leader understands it's the people. It's never the bricks and mortar, it's the people. And as you develop your own people and you're a people person and you build trust and respect and all those type of attributes here and competencies, relationship building is crucial, and that's a make or breaker. Clearly today, too, in terms of entrepreneurial spirit, now with public funding being at a huge decline statewide around the country, our federal government, everybody's counties are running deficits here. Today, it's not relying upon public funding, it's entrepreneurial spirit. Who can help not just seek funders, but who can seek investors? Who could take a program, for example, if you had a program, say, I'm just making it up here for, a program for development disabilities and an outreach program, and it costs you $250,000 a year in your budget. What if you could find someone that actually would want to invest in that program for $1 million over 4 years and put their name on that program? Think about how that $250,000 will free up your bottom line and impact it has to you. So today, competencies are entrepreneurial spirit. Next, clearly, being a positive brand builder are things people are looking for. And I remember starting my career, as Michelle said, really 40 years ago, none of us, I don't think any one of us, and you as either CEOs, COOs, board members involved in your trade groups here, none of us really went into the business certainly to make money. None of us went into the business to get a pats on the back here, but we have generally not done a good job overall as a general statement about, letting people know about who our organizations are and the success we're having. We don't like touting our horn. Today, you have to tout your horn. People need to know the type of impact you're having. They need to know your achievements. They need to know your success. Today, more than ever before, you have to be a brand builder. Next, collaborator. it's not the old, just everything going alone. Today, and I'm sure you're involved in this here, whether you're doing residential, housing, but you may also be involved with careers and job trainers and perhaps um, housing developers. So collaboration between housing development, affordable housing, and job training go together. So the idea you got to do everything yourself, and that's not a great thing that people are looking for anymore. So in terms of competencies of an executive at any level of the executive function here, people are looking for collaborators. And then last but not least is that, still goes back, it's a people business. People need to be inspirational motivated. This is a lot of work. It's a tough time. As you will know better than anybody else, people are working from home, families are sick, family members have been dying. This is a time, clearly being inspirational motivation really important. So those are kind of the competencies that you want to be thinking about as when you're starting a search, regardless of the position, and assessing your organizational strategic vision. What are the competencies you need to succeed kind of moving forward here? Next, Michelle. Okay. So one of the things that we would recommend to you, again, whether you do the search with a firm or you do the search on your own here, after you've done this assessment and after you've identified the competencies you're going to need, create this ideal candidate profile. I'm going to show you a couple examples right here. So next. This happens to be an example of a recent CEO search that we did for United Way in the East Coast here. And clearly what you want to do in a candidate profile is you want to have a chance to publicize your own organization. You want to show some pictures of mission, passion. You want a chance to brag about yourself a little bit, talk about what you've done, the impact you're having, some links, some reports, a whole series of stuff that make it a very attractive thing. It's not just about the job responsibility. So one of the things that we do is, as part of our, when we're ready to announce a search, is that we send out a profile. In our case, it goes out to about 18,000 people around the country. But so something to think about it, when you're doing a search, you clearly want to develop an ideal position profile. And if you go to the next page, Michelle, clearly you do want to lay out certainly the role of the position you're recruiting for and the qualification type of experience you're thinking about. And you can see down there, it says visionary thinker with an entrepreneurial spirit, a lot of things we talked about in the past. The role also having business acumen and demonstrated decision-making knowledge, a whole range of stuff. At the same time, but it's not just that. You want to put in the context of your organization. This is a chance to let people know we're a great organization. Yeah, we got challenged, but we're a great organization. Come and join us. It's a way of celebrating. So it's very important you develop this ideal position profile. That's a big part of this here. Another one example, Michelle. This is a search we did, I guess, about a year ago for a organization on the East Coast for a chief operating officer for an organization called Enable to take care of certain adults with developmental disabilities. And again, it's sort of laying out, give them a feel for the organization, describing the organization a little bit, kind of what it does, and then obviously giving some overview of the type of responsibilities that the CEO is going to have in compliance and program development and and programs and services, a whole range of stuff. But you want to make it attractive is kind of what you want to do. Next page, if we can, Michelle. And then the kind of same type of thing here. And you always want to have, you always want to finish it with who in your organization or your search firm, who do you want to have people send cover letters and resumes. So the second part of an executive search is, and this is where the rubber hits the road here, is this target outreach. To be successful in a search, again, whether you're trying to do this on your own or using a firm, is that the key here is the outreach. In our practice, I would say on average, 80 to 90% of every candidate we refer to a client would not have applied for the job if you put an ad in the paper or through social media promotion, things like that. So what you want to be able to do, and this is where it gets difficult, whether you're, again, looking for a CFO, COO, or CEO, or any type of C-suite position here, is does someone in your organization have the talent and the time or a group of people to be doing this, which is you want to be speaking to key leaders in your sector, nationally, statewide, regionally. asking them about, hey, so we're recruiting for obviously a chief operating officer of our development disability organization based in Michigan. It's a great organization, whatever. We're looking for this type of person. Does anybody comes to mind here? Okay. Certainly, you want to be contacting, outreaching into business, professional, trade associations. Certainly, Anchor is obviously one of the best ones that comes to mind. And then your individual state associations that many of you are members of, and I've seen them here. Certainly, other similar mission-driven organizations, clearly. So there's a whole outreach to do here. You can certainly outreach through social media. Again, when we do a search, we go out through both LinkedIn and our constant contact emails. You probably have the same thing here. Ours is about 18,000 people, but what it does, it by itself is not getting candidates, but it's like thinking of a big flare, on July 4th, like people know the party is starting. And so it's a big flare that goes out around the country, around your state, around the region, to let people know that, there's somebody's looking for a position here. And that gets people thinking. And that's very important. But the part I want to talk about here, clearly here is this here. And I have this example of not too long ago, calling up the president of a major trade group and asking her, that we're doing the search for another trade association and blah, blah, blah. And I remember her response to me was, I'm not sure who'd be interested. And my response is, I'm not interested who's interested. I'm interested in finding out, and you should be interested in who would be an ideal candidate. It's up to you or the search firm to determine to convince them or talk to the right people to convince them that is this an opportunity you want to explore yourself and why here? But it's not about who's interested. Again, the whole point of this educational process and the search is that to do it right, you need to do the first phase here about assessing where you're at so you know the kind of person you want. You're not, sometimes when someone retires after a long period of time, it's, I just want someone just like Joe, just like Jane, who's been here for 30 years. And I'm sure Joe and Jane are great people, and I know them personally as you do. But sometimes today, the kind of person you need going forward is very different. So not only do that here, but obviously you want to be out doing the outreach. This is where the rubber hits the road here. This is where organizations that try to do a search on their own can have massive difficulty because the time involved in doing this outreach here. But if you're going to do a search on your own, this is what you need to be able to do. Okay, move on, next slide. So as you get into the third stage about you've already done the assessment, you've already kind of done the profile, you've sent it out here. Now you or your team or we'll talk a little bit later on about, a search committee and depending upon what level here, we get candidate screening. And so candidate screenings involve certainly, you're going to get someone's going to give you a search firm, whatever, but there's going to be a lot of resumes and cover letters. And I'm always amazed even when people know the name of someone to apply to, you get a letter that says to whom it may concern. I always felt like, geez, you didn't take any effort at all to go on the website, even find the name of someone you can send it to whom it may concern. I just find it says something to me sometimes about the candidate. So clearly, cover letters, resumes, you're going to be screening. Certainly, hopefully people have a track record of success that you think is going to match. Today there's a lot of discussion for people in the corporate world. Can a corporate executive, can him or her, can they translate into nonprofit sector? Some can very well, some cannot. But how do you make that comparison here? And you're certainly going to be having interviews, and we're going to talk about that a little bit here. And one of the things that we really recommend that you consider, again, whether you're doing a search on your own or whatever, and what we do a lot of leadership assessment of behavioral traits and cognitive abilities. You want to get to understanding people's core traits. And we're going to explain that here in a second here, because it's really important to understand what the makeup of somebody, if they're going to fit into your organization. And clearly, when you're near the end, you're going to want to be doing reference checks, but you don't want to be just saying, give me 3 names of your brother-in-law and the guy next door. You're going to want to be asking for references on people that they have worked for, people that they have worked with, and people that have worked for them here. So you've got candidate screening is a key part here. And once you've sort of ready to, you've done the assessment, and I know I'm repeating myself, but it's important to do it. You understand the competencies, you know what you're looking for, you know the cultural fit you're going to need here, you know the players in the organization, who will fit in, who's the best COO that's going to fit in with our new CEO, who's the new CEO that's going to fit in with our board, all that kind of stuff here. And then you do screening here, and then you're going to start interviewing the process. And I want to move them to the interview process. So generally speaking, we focus in on, and we recommend that you focus in on, and you'll see in a second here, sort of a sample matrix, but there's 6 areas that you want to be asking questions on. And you can modify your questioning, again, based upon the level of executive position in your organization, but I would recommend certainly 6 areas. You certainly want to know about their leadership experience. And that's really important. Again, what have they done? What have they not done? What mistakes they've made? Clearly, you want to find out about their strategic thinking. Are they using the brain that God gave them or not? But are they thinking out of the box, or are they collaborators, or are they thinking forward the future, or they bring in new ideas, or is it just same old, same old? Again, you certainly want to get into a lot about interpersonal relationships, and the reason most 90% of people leave an organization is really not because of the money. People leave because they don't get along with the supervisor, or they don't feel there's an opportunity for promotion. So you really want to get at it from how do your candidates, how do they earn people's trust and respect? How do they develop relationships? How do they establish their credibility? That's really important to find out how they're going to work with people. And I know you know this, but this is kind of an area. Certainly at the CEO and executive level, experience with board relationships. And that's very important here. And communication style, how well do they communicate? Or they articulate? They have good writing skills, verbal skills. And certainly last but not least, just a sense of cultural fit. Well, this person's going to fit into us here. We have a style about doing things here in Los Angeles that's not going to work in New York, and vice versa. There's sort of a fit here for us. And so I'm going to show you now sort of a sample that you can use, Michelle, we can, sort of an interview matrix that we use for our clients. But turn to it, Michelle. Okay. So this is just an optional thing, but one of the things that we recommend, again, whether it's you're forming a search committee for a CEO search or for an executive level search here, is you want to be developing a series of questions that you as a team, whether it's your board, your HR officer, kind of agrees that, but you want to make sure these questions are a couple of things, that you're asking you're asking every candidate the same set of questions. And you're asking questions that are open-ended. You're not looking for a yes or no, are you tall or small? It's not. You want an open-ended question here, okay? You want thought-provoking questions that either can be a follow-up here. And so it's really, really important that we always recommend to our clients potential questions that they may want to ask for the type of position here, but we ask you to modify them. And so this is just a sample, and I have some news a little bit later on. Go back, Michelle, for a second, stick with the other one. Just so here, example, these are questions on relationship ability. I mean, how did you build your trust and respect of your employees in your current past position? How do you ask them? How do you reward and recognize people? Are you one of those people that's never patted anybody on the back or just demanded things here? How did you build a relationship in your prior job here? Tell us about a time when you had, challenging odds, and what did you overcome here? What role did you want your board to play? What role have your board play? How do you engage your board? What's your experience in making organizational change, and how do you get people to buy into it? Or how about the resistance to change that we're all dealing in at the time? So on and on about strategic thinking and how would you expect members to evaluate the impact of programs and a series of things. Go to the next slide if we can. But there's a whole series of questions that we recommend you consider, and then these are just for your guidance only. It's not just necessarily a scoring system. You can score, but it's not who's got the better score all the time. But sometimes if you're interviewing 10 candidates, you might forget about the first 2 candidates you met, maybe to focus on the last year. And be surprised how many times the first 2 candidates are actually people get hired because they've done such a good job and everybody else has to follow you. So this is just a sample for you to think about in your recruitment strategies here to have some type of interview matrix or interview guide and posing those questions and things like that. Next, Michelle. It's, in our experience anyway, it's vital to go beyond the traditional just reference checking and resume screening about experience here. You want to get the core traits. You want to see what people are capable of doing here. So I want to spend some time with this we have here. Next, Michelle. We're a partner with a firm called Telexis Talent Solutions, Telesure. I've been working with them for many, many years. I've worked with other firms. I find them terrific. And so we use I'm going to show you in a second. We use these forms both on our executive search practice, but in general, we also have a Center for Nonprofit Leadership and Board Performance, and we do a lot of leadership assessment, leadership development within an organization. And when I use leadership for an organization, I'm not just talking about the top leadership. Everybody that's in some level of management supervisory position, big emphasis today is on leadership assessment, leadership development. So the Telesure method gives you not only a potential job match to your expectations, and there's a whole factor that goes into about success factors, but really it helps you measure people's core traits. So Michelle, if we can go to the next page or so here. So here's some examples here. And the Telesure product that we use that, we're certainly happy to work with you on this, is thinking, just people's reasoning ability. Are they able to obviously, sort of think on their own? And that's a really important thing. And you see there's sort of 6 components of a personality assessment here. There's manageability, competitiveness, people contact, sense of urgency, a take charge and attitude. Now, you can see in this sample case here, someone's got a low score on competitiveness. Now, low scores by themselves don't necessarily mean, well, they're not competitive, but it means they're not wired to be competitive. It's not their core trait. So you can see in the example here, there's some questions that you might want to be asking someone if you will bring them in for an interview and you've already had them complete the assessment. Tell me about a time when it was, when you were able to maintain a certain type of relationship. Tell me about a time when you tried to take advantage, or you felt someone tried to take advantage of you, or describe your willingness to, persevere in something. So there's a lot of questions that one can ask themselves here. Same thing, a sense of urgency. You can have such a high sense of urgency that it could be, concerning that there could be almost a reluctancy to follow directions of others. So there's a range of things in a search process that we recommend to you to factor into. And I'm going to repeat a couple of things here. Core traits are crucial. There are people who can measure, example, they can have a low score on a sense of urgency, but if you find out they're actually, they don't operate that way, but that's their core trait. And others can have a low score and take charge because they're not liking to take charge, but they do it effectively. But I often use this expression, I hope you get my humor here, but it's like, you can train you can train a rabbit to swim, but sometimes you're better off hiring a fish. And so there's certain core traits sometimes in the that you can see. So if you need a real example, you're down to 3 candidates for your CEO job or your CFO job or whatever, and they all have good experience, they come across well, they present themselves well in interviews, and I should indicate it goes without exception. All of our, we should do all of our interviewing in person around the country, no matter where it was here. Everything now is just virtually. But it's clearly that, you want to find out whether or not, if 3 people are all good at it, but if 1, or 2 of them just are not take charge people, and you ask them a series of questions that can help determine whether or not they actually do take charge, and you need to take charge person, you can be in trouble. So this really helps you make a right investment here. So not only do you want to be asking the right question in you, you want to hopefully, not on every candidate, but certainly on final candidates, we recommend some form of leadership personality assessment. And now it's not measuring aptitude. It's not measuring how well you can do something. That's part of the interview process and part of their career track record, but measuring their core traits, we think is really a vital step and it's a big investment. Next, Michelle, please. Same thing, you can see the sort of samples here, different type of questions and sort of management insights here. And there's a whole host of reports that, people like we have and, to help you with this process here. And so let's move on to beyond the assessment phase here. Okay, keep going. Okay, now. So let's assume now you have done the assessment, you have developed your profile, you have created the competencies, you have made an announcement out to the world. Your team or your staff or your committee or your search firm has been out there aggressively outreach and target marketing and what we call target marketing, talent mapping to reach out to individuals. But now it's time to meet the individuals for, and there's a question coming in, Catherine, and the answer is, I'm going to get to that, but it's absolutely, Catherine's asking, is there a benefit, if I understand it, to do let me just pick up that question right now, Catherine, if you don't mind a second here. Catherine, is there a benefit to doing a leadership assessment as part of developing a training program for a new hire? The answer is absolutely. The answer is yes. We absolutely do the assessment prior to hiring somebody, but there's a whole nother scope here that one can do and it's beyond the scope of today's conference, but on our website, DennisCMiller.com, if you don't put the C in, there's actually a furniture store in Brooklyn, literally, that has the same name. But we can teach you, and there's webinars and stuff we do here and information to do a training program so you can help identify people's core traits and work for them. And we'll send you some information upon after that here. So, but absolutely, today, more than ever before, investing in your people is the best thing in the world, and it probably costs you about $1 a day to invest in someone's training. So now you have candidates, and so now you're going to start interviewing them. With the CEO search, you're obviously going to have a search committee. If it's the COO, CFO search, you're going to have the CEO, executive director involved, and other members of the executive team, and oftentimes the people that would report to that position involved in the interview process. We think it's a really good idea. So common questions I get a lot about what's the size and composition of a search committee? Well, there's not a particular number, but I would say certainly on an average size, probably about a 5-person search committee is probably appropriate, but no more than 8. I've just seen, having 15 people on a search committee is just too much. It should be a committee that is delegated by the board, authority by the board to do the outreach, and the role of the committee is one of two things. If the committee is going to do the search on their own, they're the ones doing all the work in the outreach, or if not, they're going to be working with a search firm. And obviously, what they're basically going to be doing is making sure they're interviewing candidates and things like that. So that's a peaks here is the size and composition of a search committee. Oftentimes I'm asked, who should chair it? Good question. Many times the chair of the board chairs the search committee, but other times it could be the vice chair. It could be the chair of an HR committee. Oftentimes I'm asked, could it be the prior board chair, the most recent board chair? And the answer is yes, however, with this exception. People who, whether they're chairing it or on your search committee, should be forward-thinking people. No disrespect to anybody else, but not people who are living in the past and are not familiar with your current strategic plan, your current challenges. This is about the future. This is an opportunity for you and your organization, because we know that nobody's staying in a position forever. So it's really important that you put people on this committee that are very forward-thinking type of people here. They need to know your organization. Now, does everybody have to be, again, on a CEO search, because not every search is CEO search, but do they all have to be board members? Not necessarily. You could have a consultant. You could have a search consultant perhaps on your search committee. You could have someone from the community that has been through searches before, an executive that has hired people, maybe an HR person. You can have an outside person on your search committee. But again, the whole idea here is to be involved in this process here. Now, timeframes for a search, I get asked that a lot. It really varies here. Typically, it's like a 90 to 120 day process for most. We recently did a search 6 months ago for chief operating officer. It took 7 weeks, which was very quick, very unusual. We've done searches for CEOs that have taken 6 months for a lot of different reasons, and a lot of people's hands in the bucket here. But clearly it should, it kind of should take place if it starts hypothetically on, January. You should have someone by on board by the springtime here. What is the role of the search chair? It's to be person very closely working. If you're doing the search yourself or with the search committee, he or she be in constant communication with your search partner. Sometimes I'm talking to my search clients, sometimes daily, multiple times a day, clearly weekly, Zoom calls, emails, text messages, communication, answering questions back and forth. How do I handle this? What do I do with that? The role of the search committee is going to be to screen interview people. Just before we showed you the sample interview questions, again, if the CEO search, you're going to have a search committee. You could have a search committee for a chief operating officer, depending upon the size. It's up to your CEO to really determine that. It's certainly up to the CEO and maybe in consultation with your board president or board chair to find out if you want someone else involved in it. But they need to be screening the candidates. It's really important that that's what they do, interview candidates. A component, regardless of what this is the issue of confidentiality. Let me tell you why this is important, though. Not only are you potentially liable if a person who's currently employed was to apply for a position with you or throw their hat in the ring and throw their resume forward here, and somehow their current employer found that you can be in serious trouble. So that's confidentiality is important, and I hone in on that. But a couple of things here. Just something you think about as you're debating someday, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, about needing to do a search yourself here. A lot of people will not want to apply for the job directly to an employer because they're afraid that will get back to their employer, their own employer. So they're afraid of confidentiality. With a search firm, they feel a sense of assurances, and we guarantee this, obviously, a sense of confidentiality. So that's something to think about here. Something else, regardless, if you're involved in an interviewing process, not only do you want the candidate to sell you, but you need to sell the candidate. I mean, the worst thing you want to do is ask a candidate, if you're a search firm like us, asking how'd you like meeting someone down there in Kansas City, or what you feel like. I said, I didn't like them at all. They were not energetic, they weren't enthusiastic or whatever. I didn't like the CEO or whatever. So selling the candidate is just as well as selling you got to sell them. Okay. Even when and we all seen that happen, right? Even when that you have you've interviewed someone in the first 5 minutes, just feel like it's not a fit for some reason. You still need to make sure you present a positive attitude and impression upon them and leave with a positive impression here. Certainly the role of the search committee is to select and recommend a final candidate. Sometimes it's a final 2 candidates, but recommend a candidate to the board but that's part of it. And then the search committee's role is either to someone to negotiate that offer, and many times your search firm, their experience like we do, we're asked to do probably 80% of times negotiate the offer, because people, if I'm a CEO or I'm a board president, board chair, I don't want to get involved in nickel and diming about a $200 car allowance or $3,000. I'd rather get that out of the way so I start the relationship off on positive here. So it's just important to understand the role of a search committee. And again, this is when you're doing a CEO search. One thing is very important is that when you're going to be interviewing candidates, that whoever is arranging those interviews, a search committee will do all that for you. One of the things that a search firm does is they take all the hard work, the anxiety off your plate. And so, for a lot of people, they say, geez, they think it's a lot of money, or maybe a lot of money to consider a search firm. And so I would say, generally speaking, search firms charge someplace between, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30% of a salary is kind of a fee. And, ours is well below in that number, and it's paid over a period of time and everything else like that. But, you would not build a building, right? You wouldn't build a building without an architect. I doubt you would probably try to do it yourself. Certainly I wouldn't be able to do it myself. And certainly, you hire auditors to come in and do your annual audit, and you look at your finances and everything else. So if you had a lawsuit, you're going to hire an attorney to represent you when it's a HR issue or things like that, or employment discrimination issue. So it's an investment, but if you think about something that's going to be depreciated, if someone's going to stay for 3 to 5, hopefully 5 years, usually more, you depreciate over a period of time, it's not that big of a deal. But that's kind of the role of the search committee. Same thing if you are doing a search for an executive team member. Clearly, as a CFO search, you're probably going to have your controller on it, and maybe another person that they interact with in the department, maybe the chief program officer for your organization, a whole range. You figure that out here. But clearly, I think it's important for your team. Oftentimes, as COO in our searches, they will sometimes they meet with the CEO first, and then he or she determines who else is going to move on to the next level. Sometimes they come in and meet with the executive team individually. Sometimes they meet with an executive team as a whole. And then sometimes they meet with members who they're reporting to individually, or most likely as a whole. And people have a feeling for who they like and who they don't like. So there's a whole range of process here. But again, it points out that, this define up front, if you're going to do it yourself or hiring a firm, who's going to be responsible for what your timetable is here. Next, Michelle. Okay. This is the last piece of the segment. We certainly, went over the, do upfront organizational assessment. So where are we going? What do we need? What are the competencies we need? Do the outreach and the target marketing, as in the interviewing people, doing the assessment tools, the reference checking, everything else here. But here's where research shows about 50% of CEOs alone receive no onboarding. And what does it really mean, onboarding? Onboarding is a process of that. So again, whatever executive level you might be thinking about, but so when he or she comes on board, they know from the conversation you have with you, they know in the first week, who are the key people they need to call up or go see? Who in the first 30 days, what is the number 1 or 2 issues that they have to tackle? What is the biggest problem they're going to face right off the bat? They may have a decision for you. And so who should they meet? What social, cultural, professional adjustments? So people come into the world. So but you want to set up, so it's not like you've got every hour on the hour, every day met, but you want to have a process that, it's really important for you to meet our mayor. It's very important for you to meet within the month our president of our, the Wisconsin Association for Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. It's very important for them to know up front. Don't surprise them and say, well, you're not going to surprise them and say, just by the way, I'm glad you came on board, but I want to tell you, we're losing $1.5 million a month. I mean, that's, no surprises. So, and communications, who, what, and when. And certainly, I think it's very important to lay out some milestones and, let it evolve. Don't put handcuffs on people if they're really good, but sort of, what are the milestones of sort of 30 days, 90 days, in a year? It's even good. Work with a client right now that's down to 2 final candidates and going through the questions they're going to be asking them next week. And someone said to me, how about us asking about a 30, 60-day, 90-day plan? I said, well, that's too close together. So they're going to have a discussion about, besides everything else they ask them, but it's, what's your strategic vision for the first 30 days, the first 6 months of the year? So those are the type of things you want to be thinking about. So if you put it all together, there are 5 stages. It's the assessment pieces. I cannot tell you how important it is here to rush out and start looking for someone without the opportunity to assess yourselves. You're going to miss out. Obviously, identifying, putting that profile together, and that's a publicity for yourself here. Knowing the competencies you're looking for today that you don't do, and the target outreach is crucial. The interviewing process, the assessment process, who's going to fit in best. There's a lot of very talented people that don't always fit in. There's a lot of very talented people that don't work well with other people here. And then when you select somebody, obviously you want to lay out an onboarding process here. Michelle. So one of the things I want to let everybody know about, we're very excited to be a significant investor in Anchor. I've known Barbara Merrill for a number of years, and Kate McNulty We're very proud to be a gold level sponsor here. But for everybody who has signed up for the for the webinar today, we're going to send you a free ebook, free that you can download the book. Make sure go back and maybe just one picture to go back for a second. There you go. Okay. Now everybody's concerned about the CEO search, but one of the books I wrote, and I always joke, I said, if Mrs. Fritz, my 7th grade English teacher, knew I wrote 2 sentences together correctly, she'd have a heart attack. If she knew I wrote 5 books, she'd have multiple heart attacks in the gravesite and turn over and wake everybody else up in the cemetery. But we're going to provide for all of you an ebook you freely download, a guide to recruiting your next CEO, the Executive Search Handbook for Nonprofit Boards, and it's the same methodology pretty much for a COO search or any other executive level search. Takes you through the same process that I kind of went through here today about the understanding the search process, determining your strategic vision and where you need to go. It's really good time to obviously do a self-evaluation. You know, this is not, yes, you just lost someone, or someone's leaving retirement, there's a time to freshen up here. Make sure you're identifying those right competencies that you need. Example here. If you don't do a study of it, you clearly, a strategic issue for you, your organizational example could be, you need to build your board. Your board may be stale or in need of revitalization or new fresh blood or whatever. But if you didn't think about, do you have any experience building a board, you have someone on board who's been a great operating officer or whatever, but they haven't built a board. So you want to do that. Another issue that you have is that, you know, your fundraising events are limited to, you know, sort of a golf outing or gala or a wine tasting or something like that. But then you've never had a CEO involved really in philanthropy development. You want to be knowing that as a competency. So those are things that are important to do here. The book will lay out sort of, again, identifying screening candidates, a whole range of issues about interviews, reference checking, how to negotiate the offer and the onboarding process. So everybody's going to get a free book as my thanks to all of you and for all the work that you do on behalf of so many. I want to think, Michelle, we could see if we could take some questions right now. If anybody has any questions up,
yeah, I got a couple of questions privately. So if you want to start with these, one question is: Have you, Dennis, ever worked with a client in an advisory capacity rather than, you know, handling the complete search from start to finish?
Oh, good. Yeah, yes, we have occasionally. You know, most of our work is a full search, but there are a number of clients that we use that reach out to us and say, listen, you know, we want to try to do the search ourselves, but we could really use you as an advisor, sort of like Searchlight, you know, like Bud Light. So yes, we can apply an advisory role to your search committee. Some things that we've done for others where it looks like we're doing the search. We sent out the announcement to thousands of people about doing the search here, but for whatever reason, you know, I mean, again, our fees are very affordable. That's why we get a lot of work, but you know, but it might be an issue for you. So you think we can try to do our search ourselves, but want our advice, because doing it alone, particularly if it's for the first time, is difficult. So the answer is yes, we can work with that. It's a much more modified fee. We can do that. So the answer is yes.
Another question, which is, it kind of follows on the first. From your experience, what is the biggest difference between using a service like yours or doing the search in-house?
Well, I think the two things. The two things are loud and clear. One is I think I've only seen it really in the past 10 years, one organization do it on their own well, between you and me. I think that thinking that the biggest drawback when you do it yourself is thinking that if we let people know we're looking for someone, that we'll get resumes. And you don't want to do the search properly. What you want to do, if you want to do it yourself, you have to have a dedicated staff or team with the knowledge and ability to do the outreach. That is really, you don't want to just get people who are already looking for work. Not that there's anything wrong with looking for work. I've looked for work in my own career a couple of times, but you want to find someone who's really ideally not looking for work, but they didn't think about the opportunity, and they're happy in their job, is because you want happy people. I see, by the way, my email address is wrong. So
Oh,
it is,
here, I'll post the,
that's right. Listen, it's Dennis C. Miller. Some people ask me a lot, am I the original Dennis Miller? And I tell people, yes, I am, because I think I'm older than him. And I actually played football, and his mother gave him my name. So it's Dennis at DennisCMiller.com and things like that. So the answer is, Michelle, that's one piece. The other thing is, I don't think people understand, and it's well meant to be, but the time and energy that the board or even the executive team feels, we're going to do our own search for our COO or CFO, and then you realize it's taken us away from some vital areas that we had to focus in on. So the two major things, I think the difference is I don't realize the time and energy it would take for me to do this. I thought we just get resumes. That's not a search. And the other one is you will have the wherewithal, the talent, and the experience to tap into candidates that are not, we're not looking. That's the biggest difference here.
another question came in. If you do a search, what happens if the candidate doesn't work out or leaves?
Well, in our practice, in our firm, we have a policy. Thank God we've never had to use it. Every time we do a search, we guarantee that if for any reason that candidate would leave, or they were asked to leave, or whatever, within a year, we do a free search. We put a little caveat and say, let this special circumstance if someone leaves because someone's behaving, immorally to them, another thing. But we guarantee a search. I'm glad to say, around the country, we have never had that happen. I won't say the name of an organization that everybody would know, and we only do executive level searches these days. But in the past, we would, particularly the organization we did a lot of work with, we would oftentimes do a director level search, like a director of community outreach or a director of volunteers and things like that for a client that we did a lot of business with. And we had a situation where even when candidates were going down to interview with the vice president, a couple coming back, and I don't think I could work with her, and such and such. But we did the search. We got some really great candidates, and then about, I'm going to sneeze here in a second here. In about, hold on. So I'm going to sneeze in about 6 months, 2 people left. If you remember, Michelle,
Mm-hmm.
and I was shocked, and I asked Michelle, could we speak to them? I was surprised because they were really good and happy, and they told us that they just could not work with this vice president any longer. And once we heard that, I spoke to the CEO I knew quite well, did a lot of work with him, and a good friend. And we recruited their chief operating officer. And I said to them, we can't recruit our replacement because of the feedback we've gotten from this person. And they were a little surprised and a little taken back, but I had to be honest with them. I'm not going to recruit someone and have someone come into a situation they can't be successful at. And I said, hey, if I lose business, I lose business, but I just it's the right thing to do. And normally we won't do a search if we don't think it's a good fit for us, organization. I mean, it's not like we pass business up, but once or twice we just feel like, I'm not sure I can confidently recruit someone to work in that situation here. But in this case, they called us back 6 months later and said, by the way, we decided we'd let that person go. Would you do another search for us? So there's guarantees is kind of the way we work at it. And, there's a full scope approach, top to bottom, where the search committee with the executive team just let us do the work. And also, if you want to do it on your own, understanding, and we can be an advisor to you and play a role at a sort of a modest fee. And what other questions did I miss, Michelle? Anything else?
Actually, no, I think we've got everyone's questions, but I do think you ought to mention that you're always open to having a complimentary phone call with someone
so there's two things.
if they're thinking about a
so
search
I'm
and they
happy
want to know what to do.
Yeah, so I'm glad it's my fault for misspelling my, again, Dennis at DennisCMiller.com. We will, as Michelle indicated earlier, we will get the webinar and the PowerPoint sent out to you. But anybody, yourselves, because sometimes people don't want to ask questions, when they're involved with other people in their own networks, whatever. But I'm happy to schedule a free consultation. I don't care if it's a 30 minutes or an hour. I don't count my clock. If you want to schedule either yourself as a board member or CEO or a member of your team or a member of your board and just want to ask questions, all you have to do is send me an email, Dennis@denniscmo.com. We'll look at the schedule here. Again, we are proud to be strategic partners with Anchor. You do fabulous work. So do that. I'm happy to set that up as well. I would encourage you, you'll be getting newsletters, updates from us. We're doing another webinar on boards and the keys for board success in November. We'll also, we'll be letting Barbara know other webinars. We do a lot of webinars and training. I also would recommend that you get a chance, go to our website, DennisCMiller.com. There's a lot of free information on our website that we like to offer you. So we do dozens of webinars probably every year. So not just by myself, but our team has 7 top executives. And one of the things about our firm is that not only are we experts in executive search. I mean, I did my first search in 1984. You'll get a sense of my age. I tell people I feel like I'm 39, but my body is 1950 Ford truck that's had a few major parts replaced. But we're not only experts in search, but every one of us has been a CEO or board chair or head of foundation or philanthropy and things on that right. And you'll see all the team we have. And Michelle's been with me for 16 years as our executive vice president. So there's a lot of free information here, and it's not only on search, but webinars, articles, blogs, and there's a lot of free information about our Center for Nonprofit Leadership and Board Governance. So I go out of our way to make sure everything we do is affordable. So we have online assessment tools for board and leadership assessment, which is much different from other assessment tools because we actually provide recommendation. We don't just give you a score. We've got CO evaluation tools, so the CO can be evaluated by the board and do their own self-evaluation. And as the person asked early on, you see the TelAssure leadership assessment and 360 tools. And we have 2 online courses that boards all around the country use, how to become a high-performing nonprofit board, board chair's guide to organizational success, and how to become a high-performing executive nonprofit leadership team, and how to, and they're all available, and they're very affordable. It's very affordable, and so we have a lot of tools for that. So, I hope you've enjoyed webinar today. It's the first one we're doing with Anchor. I appreciate having feedback. If you liked our webinar, thought it was helpful, to please, let Barbara or Kate know. If you did not think it was very helpful, please forget Barbara Merrill or Kate's phone number or email. I'm kidding. And I do look forward to speaking to you soon, and have a great day, and be very careful and safe out there right now, health-wise. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.